In this video, we're going to take a look at getting started with RStudio. Our final goal would be to create some kind of table of participant characteristics or baseline characteristics as we have in this paper here. And I've suggested just a few variables because this is actually quite a lot to do. And the data is available on Dryad. So we have an Excel file with all the data, which I've probably also included in the learning materials as a CSV file, and a README file. That MD stands for Markdown, which we'll see in a second, which you can open in a text editor, and that has all the information about what the variables mean and what the codes mean. So you need both of those. So assuming you've downloaded R and RStudio from the links provided and you open it up, when you first open it, it's probably going to look like this. There'll be a blank console window, a blank environment window, and probably a blank plots window, and you'll have to start doing something to see anything else. Once you open up a file, you'll be able to see what they are in the top window here, and that will shift down. So I've put in a whole lot of code to get started, but you can also start with a blank file and type it as you go. There is actual code that can run, and then there's comment code, which starts with a hash. So any files that I have probably have a lot of comments in them just to make sure it's clear what each command does. And if I want to divide it up into sections, I might put a large comment like this, just with lines of hashes to separate it. You could do this differently and use dashes or something else, but it's just convenient for breaking up lines of code. So to open a blank code file, you can go to File, New File, RScript. You'll see there's a whole lot of options here. We're not going to use all of them. And then you have a blank code file. So if you want to start typing in here, this is the week 1 code, and you can type out some stuff yourself and save it. And you'll notice that this has the extension .r. The other option, well, there's a few, but we're only going to look at one other, is to have a markdown file. So new file, notebook, sorry. Markdown is general, and there's a lot of different options to create there. If we open a notebook file, it'll give us a sample document that we can work from. And this now has it's not showing us the extension. It should have the extension RMD. And you can see that it gives you hints on what to do. So I'll just need to save this quickly. Now that I've saved it, it's got the extension RMD on it. So a notebook file is a combination of, I guess, report writing in Markdown and actual code that's going to run. A code block will look a little bit different here, and we can execute the code block in line. CARS is an inbuilt data package, so that's why it sort of knows what to do. If you're working with your own data, you're going to have to do some more stuff before you can plot anything. You actually have to read in the data to get started. But it gives you little bits of little hints here about what will look like what. And you'll notice that there is an outline version here. So I think if we start adding in some Markdown main heading, and then a second level heading would be 2 hashes. Second, maybe we call this a subheading. We can see this here. So when you're in the Markdown or notebook version, this hash is going to be a heading, and the level of the heading is the number of hashes, whereas in the R code, this hash is just for a comment. To see what this looks like, you get this preview button here. You can knit it to a different format. So the knitting is the pull it all together into the one document. So if we knit to HTML, this is what it's going to look like as an HTML document. Maybe for yourself, it's more helpful to have it as a Word document. I'm not quite sure why that failed. I'll have to look at that later because I tried it just a second ago and it was fine. And then you'll have this. It hasn't got those headings here because this was an old one that I did a moment ago. So you can output all your writing with the code. It's up to you what you want to do. I do actually use Markdown, but I use it for Bookdown, and that's what all the learning materials are created in. So that's a very big project. I tend not to use these for one-off bits of analysis because I just find them irritating, but you can do whatever you want. If I did need some code in R, I'm actually more likely to do this and just keep my code separate from my output. Okay, so we have our file open and we want to be able to start working with it. If you're in a notebook, you need to create a code chunk before you can put the code in there. So it gives you little hints about how to add new chunks and how to get started. So it's probably a good idea to keep the hint available here while you're getting used to how to use it. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the code document here and I'll close off that one. Don't save it. All right, so we can add Copilot into RStudio. Now, I haven't tried doing this before, so this is going to be the first time for me live on a video recording. Tools, global options, and Copilot. Let's enable it. We will install it. You don't have to do this. Okay, you can just use Copilot in a separate window. But here you've got some options for automatically generating some code, and this is really going to be personal preference as to whether or not this irritates you. And I'm not sure yet whether or not it would irritate me. Probably depend what type of thing I'm trying to do. So I'm just going to go, okay. Okay, so I just paused for a second to double check that I hadn't done something wrong because I couldn't see a little Copilot window open up like there's a Gemini window in some other packages for Python. But it will still do the code hinting. But I think if you want to ask Copilot a question, you'll have to have a separate Copilot window open. But this might be enough for us. So I'll open back up a blank R script just to test out the Copilot. And let's open an Excel file of data. So this doesn't seem to be working in exactly the same way that it will for Python in Google Collaborate. But okay, I just had to pause then and chat with my other Copilot to work out how to get this Copilot to work. And it seems that you have to sign in to GitHub to make it work. So you need to go back to the tools, global options, and then go back to Copilot and follow the information to sign in or to create a GitHub account. And then it will also open up some stuff in a separate GitHub window, but then the code completions will be on. So if you're having trouble doing that, let me know in class and we'll try and sort it out. Or you can just use Copilot in a separate window to get some code hints. So the first thing that we would want to do is to open up some data in R, and there are some steps that we have to follow, which I have written out in the code file, but I'm curious to see what Copilot will do. So open up data in Excel format. So it's given us the correct code hint, so presumably tab to accept it. So what this is going to do, oh, it's given me the next, this is quite nice actually, it's given me the next comment as well. I would want to go back and change the comment relating to this code, because what this is doing is installing the library that we need in order to read an Excel file. So natively, R will read a CSV file fine, but to read Excel or other formats, we need to have install the library. This is very quick. If this was me, I would probably change some of these words, but that is quite nice to have this being done for me. If you don't already have this library installed, you may need to actually install it first. So there's some options that you can do purely from the code, and that there's some you might want to do through the tools. So the first time you use them, you have to make sure that they're downloaded from the internet, and then it can load them in. If you go to Tools, Install Packages, it's very easy to do. You can also do it with a bit of code. So if we're after Read Excel, you'll see that it gives you the option and then you install it. If I do this, it'll probably just tell me it's already got it. Let's just see if it finds the Jamovi package. It should do. GMV. Yeah, so if you want to do any of the commands that you can get out of Jamovi, but you want to do them in RStudio, you can install the Jamovi library and you can copy and paste the syntax from Jamovi into RStudio. Again, I haven't quite worked out why you would want to do that other than just using Jamovi to begin with, but it's nice to know that you can. So there's a couple of libraries that you're going to need. You probably have to keep installing them all the time as you want to do more and more things. I've got the Read Excel to read in an Excel file, and then I used a CSV anyway because I changed my mind. Don't ask me why. Summary tools will help do some summary information in a slightly nicer way than some of the default summary tools. And then the ggplot2 is like your base library for doing a bunch of different plots, and that will get used quite often. So I'm going to cancel that, but you need to go through and actually install them before you can run them. And the other thing you need to do is set your working directory, which you can do with a line of code, or you can do through session set working directory, just to make sure it knows where to read the file in from. So if you have your code sitting in the same folder as your data file, you can just set it to the source file location. So this means that when you come to read in a file, all you have to do is say, this is the file that I want, and it's already looking in the correct folder. Otherwise, you're going to have to put in the whole file path. Usually when students can't load in their data, it's because they haven't set their working directory. That's like the #1 problem. So just make sure you do that. So using the Copilot, it has told us how to do this, but it hasn't set the working directory first. So maybe we should go up here and ask it to set the working directory. Will it give us the code? It will. So let's accept that. Now you're going to have to change this to whatever your folder path is. If you can't be bothered to look up what your folder path is, that's where you can just use the source file location, and then that will pull the folder path from wherever you saved this file to. So if I was doing this, I would go through and I'd probably change some of these comments to match up to what I'm doing. But this is a good start in R. I guess we could try it. I'm not going to try it with a notebook as well. I think actually that might take a little bit long, but for any code that we write here, we can write code here as well. So let me just try writing. I wonder what it'll do. Create a new code chunk suppressing output. I don't know if it'll do it because it's a markdown. Oh, it just do it. That's very helpful. So it hasn't done the end of the code chunk. So this is just text. The code chunk that we see the example here has got 3 like open quotes, and then it's telling it this is going to be our code. So we've got the start of it there, but we don't have the end of it. So I'm going to add the ending 3 chunks to say the end of it. But it has given me the bit. Oh, it's given me a new code. Sure, let's have a look and see what it'll do. So you can run some Python code too, but it hasn't given us the end. So that's nice. Probably if I was doing Python, I don't know if I would do it in RStudio, but I guess you can. But to go back to this one, so the basic code chunk will be in R, and that's going to show us the output. But if we're going to do a bunch of code that we don't actually want to see the output for because it's kind of set up information and we just want it to run, we can use this command here, echo false, that we don't want to see it. But it's possible you do want to see it for your, thank you. It's giving me a little hint there that it's not going to show it. Summary cars. This is quite fun, actually. It's just suggesting stuff that I don't want to do. So that's probably the main thing to be aware of with AI. It's doing its best based on what is already here. And what is already here is the cars data, but that's not the data that I want. So we have to tell it what we want before it can give it to us. What I was going to say is that the first time you're doing code, you may want to see absolutely everything so that you remember all the code that it took to get there. So you might not want to use this to start with. So any of the code that I use in a simple R file, you can put into a chunk in a notebook file and it will work the same. So let's keep going through here. So you need to put in all of these and we want to view the data frame. So let's just run those bits there. And it looks like I haven't copied the file across to the right path. So let me just pause and I'll make sure the code is sitting in my folder, not the code, the data. Okay, so you'll never guess what I did. I told you how to set the working directory, but then I didn't actually do it. So my data is actually sitting there and it just wasn't looking in the right place. So I went through and I did the set working directory to my source file location, reran the code, and then it's fine. So let's have a look at what we've got showing up now in R that we've run the first little bit of code. We have a repeat of all the commands that we gave it, which we probably don't care too much about. In the environment, we can now see our data frame. So I called this DF a data frame. I don't even think I like that. That just seems to be what a lot of the Gen AI calls it. Because to me, DF is always degrees of freedom. So you can call it DF, you can call it probably something more informative like the NAFLD data, or if you've got different versions, call it 1. Usually I would say don't make this too long because you're going to have to type it a lot. But now that we've got code hinting from generative AI, we actually don't need to worry about having slightly longer names because it's probably going to code hint us what the code should be anyway once it can see the names that we've given it. So it still wants to give me code hints. I don't know if I can tell it not to hint me for a little while. I'll just leave that there. So I've got this as data frame, call it whatever you like, and we can see information about each of these variables here. And we can have a look at it. It should have opened up a little data window so you can see what it looks like. Okay. When you save this file, if you've been writing it as code, it's only going to save this file here that you can see your code file. It's not going to save the output. So if you want to save all the output, you need to cut and paste it into a different file, or you could use the notebook and actually knit it into a Word document to save all the output. Or you could have a separate file open that you save bits and pieces. That's kind of up to you. So one of the first things that we need to do, I'm just looking at the time of this video, it's already quite long, so I'll try to move quite quickly through this, is that if we have a variable which is numeric, or an integer for that matter, RStudio is probably going to want to treat it as continuous, and we need to make sure that it's going to treat it as categorical. And the way to do that is to use the as factor command. And then it tells us that the NAFLD is actually a categorical variable. We can do the same with age, and we might also want to assign some labels. So we have some code here for assigning labels to age. So let's just try out Copilot again. I don't want to display, just assign label names to the variable NAFLD 001, no, yes. Okay, so it has done it. It's done it a little bit differently, and that's completely fine. So the data NAFLD, it's done the factor command combined with the labels command. Now this is where you need to double check that you're getting these labels in the right order. I've just guessed that 0 is no and 1 is yes. You need to double check that from the README file, because I could be getting that mixed up. And that will just ensure that it's treating all our if we do this for each categorical variable, that we're treating them as categories and not as numeric. So we're assigning labels, and that's just all set up there. So let me just run that and check that that's all fine. And we're getting a little bit more information showing up here for the values in our environment window. So next we want to summarize the variable. Let's just see. Oh. Summarize NAFLD. Okay, so you can try these, but this is where it's helpful to become familiar with some of the libraries. If you ask Gen AI to do something, it will do it one way, but it doesn't necessarily it's the best way or the preferred way. You have to decide what you want it to do and then ask it specifically using the summary tools. Oh, I can't spell library. So it's going to tell me that I have to load in that library first. Thank you. Okay, are we in an... Okay. Oh, it may be learning that from my... I'm seeing a problem. Sure. Okay. I can tell those colors are awful already, but sure, let's do that. I think it's getting this. So this is where you have to be aware of what it can see and what it can't see. So I think it is getting this because it can see my existing code over here. And if it couldn't see this, I don't know if it would be able to just generate all those hints. But if you tell it what you want it to do, it can do it. But the problem here is that it's creating very messy code because it's loaded the summary tools 3 times. We don't need to do that. We just load the library for summary tools once at the top. And I guess that's partially my fault because I told it to do that when I didn't already have it loaded in. I'm going to delete that. I'm going to delete that. And then we've got a table of age by NAFLD. Now it decided to do that itself, but it could have done that based... Oh, this might get irritating actually that it's hinting little comments for me. Yeah, so I think it has scanned through my existing code and done it already. So If we run this, we get this table, and this is quite nice, I think, already. And if you want to know the different options for creating descriptive statistics or summaries of variables, then that would be something that you could probably ask Copilot in a separate window, or just do an internet search. There is a lot of help information available for RStudio because it's really, really widely used. And you'll notice that over here it has a little tutorial option here. So you can go through and it's going to do it with a basic summarize command. So you can try that. The output will look a little bit different for each of these summary tools. And there's probably more tools available for summarizing data than there are for a lot of other things. So this is probably the most frustrating part, where there's lots of options for doing it. Whereas when you get, I guess even for t-tests and chi-square tests, there's a couple of different options, but they don't matter so much. Then we can move on to doing a bar chart, and we're using the ggplot library, which I already installed earlier. So you'll have to make sure that you install it. And then clearly Copilot is happy to give you help with that, except it shows very ugly colors. It had that red and the blue. These default colors are quite nice. And then if you want this as a percentage chart, you could just ask for the for a little bit of help with the code, or you could Google the code for ggplot percentage chart. I will just point out that this says ggplot and the library we installed was ggplot2. That's okay. ggplot2 includes all of your basic ggplot commands as far as I'm aware, unless something has been discontinued. So it's okay that that doesn't have the 2 on the end of it because it's included in the ggplot2 data. We can try a box plot, and that looks quite nice. And we would use the box plot for the continuous data to decide if we're going to summarize using the mean and the standard deviation, or the median and the quartiles. In this case, even though we have some outliers and it's a tiny bit skewed, it's mostly normal, and we have a really large sample size. So the central limit theorem will apply if we want to do a t-test, and we would most likely still summarize with mean and standard deviation. Some of the other variables are a lot more skewed. Let's have a look at a histogram. That's very pretty. I will say that R does very nice graphs by default. They are quite lovely. You do need to make sure you've added in the labels here, because if you haven't added in the labels, you'll just get 0 and 1, and that's completely useless for interpreting the data. You need to have the labels in here so that they appear on your graphs. And we'll do a test, and we'll move on to tests another time. I think that'll do for this video because we're nearly at 30 minutes. Go through a process of deciding what it is that you want to do. Either Google the code that you need, or watch one of these tutorials, or use the code hints to do this. And it may be helpful to have Copilot open in a separate window if something doesn't work, and you can literally cut and paste and say, I wanted to do this box plot, but it's done it in, what did it do? A bar chart, sorry. I wanted to do a bar chart. It's done it as counts. How do I convert it to a percentage? And you can, and it will give you, fix up the code for you, and then you can cut and paste it back in and see if it works. But the point is that you have to know what you want to do, and then Copilot can hint the code for you. And most of the time it does a pretty good job. It's going to try and anticipate what you want to do, and it might get it wrong. So maybe turn the automatic completions off and just have it complete when you ask it to. That's up to you. The idea is that you are driving the car, you're in charge, and this is driving assist. This is just lane assist to give you a little warning and a little help, but it's not responsible for the code. You are. So if you aren't sure what to do, ask and clarify that first, and then you can go through and work out how to make R do it for you. And anything that you do in the code here, you can also do in a notebook and then output it as a Word document. Okay, that'll do for now. Good luck, and let me know all your problems as you find them.